everybody. This is Diane Dobry, and today's Intentions podcast is about the topic of serendipity. And I'm just going to tell a short story about serendipity that met with some of my hopes and dreams and intentions that were set. So I've found several times in my life that when I wanted something, serendipitous experiences brought it to me. Years ago, when the internet was only dial up and laptops were new and beepers were the way of reaching someone right away, I made a wish list of things that I wanted and wrote in my diary. And one of the things was a laptop. I had a beeper and a couple of other things. And one of the things was a laptop. I didn't have the money for a laptop, and I really didn't know how to get one because laptops were fairly new at the time. It was in the 1990s. But one day, a coworker emailed me saying that he had a friend who was selling a laptop with a variety of programs on it for only $350. He didn't know I wanted one, so I decided to take it, and I had written that down, and it came to me. So even before that time, when my kids were really young, I would be in the backyard pushing my younger son on a swing, and I would be looking at my house from the back, and I would imagine changing my Cape Cod style house into a 2-story colonial. And as I was pushing him on the swing, I was picturing in my mind what I wanted it to look like. I pictured where the windows would go. I pictured how the rooms would be arranged. I thought about maybe adding a deck to the back of the house. I just was trying to picture in my head how I wanted it to be. But we didn't have any funds to do it at the time. I just kept picturing it every time I looked at the house. Like, if I were going to improve it, this is what I would do. And at one point, my in-laws sold their house and moved to Florida. And they unexpectedly gave us a gift of money that allowed us to start making those changes. Years later, close to the time when I was getting ready to sell the house, I was in the backyard and I happened to look at the back of the house, and I realized that the way the house was, by the time we were going to sell it, fit the vision I had had of it when my son was a toddler, and we moved when both my sons were out of high school. But that vision, I kept pushing him on the swing and imagining the changes, and it seems like a small gradual thing, but it came to pass. And it wasn't sudden. It wasn't sudden, it wasn't unexpected, but it was in a way, because we really didn't have the money. I didn't know where it was going to come from, but it ended up being the house that I had pictured. And that wasn't the only time I envisioned a home that I would have. When I was a teenager, I would collect magazine clippings of homes and rooms that I liked. One of the photos that I cut out was of a Victorian home that had a large front porch, and it had big bay windows in the front and on the sides of the house. I guess wherever the different living room was and the dining room was, and but it had several large bay windows. About 40 years later, I was no longer a teenager, but I found myself living in a house in upstate New York that looked very much like the photo that I had cut out. I didn't seek this house out. I almost had no choice of where to live, because I had been offered a job and there were not a lot of places to rent at the time. I was working at a college and I didn't want to live in student apartments, but a woman at the school was going to rent this duplex, half of the house, and had to back out of it. So she said, "Oh, you should go there and, you could probably rent it." And I ended up going there to get it, and I was in kind of a hurry, so I had to make a quick choice, and it looked so much like the photos, and I didn't really look for it to happen. It just, that was the house that was available. That was the house I moved into, and it looked just like a house that I had imagined myself living in. And the funny thing is that it felt like home to me when I lived there. It felt like a real home. And I hadn't felt like that since I had had my own house before I got divorced. And since that time, I had lived in different apartments and different places. But when I moved into that big old Victorian house, it felt like home. Thanks for listening.